All right, it looks like we can go ahead and get started. So for those of you who don't know me and somehow missed the keynote, I'm Sean, same person, same old picture. We're just gonna skip that. I usually, if you're engaged in the community, this is probably what you better know me by. It's an avatar I've been using for years and years. And I'm the director of community. When I first started at Spiceworks, I was not. I actually started as, thank you very much. I started as a community manager then. Previously, I actually worked in the online game industry, which is sort of where this avatar came from. I worked at BioWare on Star Wars: The Old Republic. I worked at EA for a number of years, Ubisoft, things like that. So I'm well versed with communities. And actually, the fun fact is when I first came to this community, they explained the job to me, and I was like, oh, it's the real world. It's going to be boring. Come to find out, IT pros and gamers, there's not a big difference, except for you guys are a lot more mature, which I really enjoy. I don't get a lot of links to things like Meat Spin and other savory parts of the internet, shall we say. So who here already has a community account and is engaged in the community at least a few times? All right, so a decent amount of you. So some of you are going to hear things you probably already know. So when I talk about the community, one of the things I always reference is an iceberg. And for those of you who've already been in there, you sort of know this is true. When we first talk about it, you see the stuff at the top. There's this homepage, there's discussion groups, there's the Learn Center, there's your feed, answer questions, how-tos. And that's what most people think about, especially if you're coming to us through anything like Google, coming through Bing, I still believe some people use, other search providers. Generally, you're going there, trying to find an answer, and we're just lucky enough that Spiceworks is coming up first. A lot of the great content due to the IT pros we have engaging in it. But as you start to dig into Spiceworks, you start noticing there's a lot more going on. And it just keeps going and going and going. And it's just one of those things where sometimes it feels a little daunting to get in. There's so many things going on. Even when you first register, I think our welcome email gives you like 13 different things to start doing right away. It's like, hey, thanks, go fill out your profile, join the Spice Corps, go make your first post, go do the daily challenge. It just keeps going and going. And maybe one day we'll make that a series and spoon feed that out. That's my hope. So it always answers that question is, where do I start? Like there's so many things going on in the community. Where's a good place to begin? And ironically, what we call the start page. Probably a good place to start. So the start page, it used to be the feed. So if you've been in the community a long time ago, the only time you actually got to access the community was if you were logged in. We changed that 2-3 years ago, and now we have a visitor version of it. And the start page is sort of where we hand curate content. You'll see content by Spiceworks, but you also see a lot of content by IT pros themselves. Although I picked a bad day to take a screenshot of this because you don't see that as much. A lot of orange because it's leading up to Spice World, and we're always happy with different kinds of content. The other reason I point that out, though, is we do have what we call, I'm pretty sure I did, yeah. We call the triad. The triad is generally those 3 stories that we've curated the most recently. We feel we want the entire community to know about. They're not just something that's like, hey, if I'm just interested in a Cisco router, this is something that's going to be a little bit more widespread. Or if it's just very news fetching. Back when Superfish happened with Lenovo, we put that on the homepage, which made Lenovo super happy, let me tell you. Had to chat with them about, hey, at the end of the day, Spiceworks is about making sure IT pros have the right information. While we love all the brands that engage with us, when news happens, news happens. The other thing we have is what we call the action cards. And the action cards are like one of our first attempts to start leading people into what to do. You'll have things about your local Spice Corps. I'm trying to think what all I had on there. You have things about your local Spice Corps. It tells you how many points you have. If you take the daily challenge, which I'll get into in a minute, things like that. Just sort of things to get you in there. I've already read the top stories. I've already read some other things. What do I need to do next? And then from there, you also have notifications. And notifications are just another way of letting you know, hey, if people spiced up my content. And for us, we say spice up, but it's really a like. If you're not well-versed in Spiceworks, we use a lot of spice terms. It's spice ups and spice cores and things like that. The real version of this is, hey, has someone liked? Has someone tagged me? Has someone done something like that? And then from there, we have what we call my feed, which used to be the old start page. And my feed, oh, it looks different from looking at it that way. And my feed is just like a feed from every other social community or network out there. It's based off of the things you follow. We actually have 2 different versions. We have the big version if I love to see a big card, get to see some of the content right away. Or if you're crazy like me, I like everything condensed. It fits more in there. I can quickly glance over what's going on, what I want to read into and what I don't. The reason I also like to point out my feed is, again, it's based off of the things you follow. And for us, primarily, that's the IT pros you follow, but also the discussion groups. And one of the fun things that we do is when you join the community, there's that blue screen. You saw it actually on the main stage. They have the Spice cores down here, but up here, it's like, hey, what areas am I interested in? I'm interested in networking. I'm interested in Windows. If you ever actually put your mouse over that, you'll notice it's actually comprised of 5, sometimes up to 8 different discussion groups. And all of a sudden you join the community and you're following 40 or 50 groups. You're like, whoa, it's a lot of content. There's always a lot of things going in there. So one of the things I always lead people to is go into there and actually start unchecking anything that you're not super curious about. It makes the feed a lot more manageable. And if there's high value content, we're going to curate that on the homepage anyways. You know, if I'm not big into SSDs, there's no reason for me to follow SSDs. If I'm not big into contests, but who isn't? I'm not big into it because I can't win because I work there. Everyone else likes winning free stuff. But if there's things like that, go ahead and uncheck that. For me, once you're first getting started in the community, your manageable groups are maybe 10, maybe up to 20 groups maximum. A lot of groups are just getting a lot of new content, a lot of new conversations. It just keeps whizzing by if you are following too many things. From there, the other thing I always like to point out is we have what we call user groups, and user groups are private groups. We also have other kind of private groups, but user groups I like to point out specifically because these are little niche areas of the community, and the challenge with groups like that is sometimes the conversations don't happen as rapidly. And so what I always promote is making sure that you know when you're following a community, you actually have an option to get email notifications. If you're following the networking group, do not turn that on. You will get bombarded. But when you're following a smaller group, sometimes that's really helpful because it lets you know, hey, you know, here's these 30 new networking topics. Oh, well, I'm into photography, or there's one about World of Warcraft. There's one about cybersecurity. Those smaller groups, it'll let you know something new has happened in there. It doesn't flood your inbox. Also a big fan of going to my subscription center and cleaning it up. I like to subscribe to everything, but it's to make sure that we're not sending out anything weird. I look at our partner deals and everything else. But if I was a community user, this would probably look a little bit different. So I always recommend cleaning up if you want to know about offers, if you want to be part of Voice of IT. Voice of IT is actually our survey program, and we take data from all of our IT pros. And part of the state of IT that they talked about on the main stage is actually built from data from that. Snap is sort of our daily dose of news. SpiceWire, actually don't believe is around anymore, so maybe we'll remove that. And then the digest. And for me, this is the one I always try and get people to pick either daily or weekly. And by that, it's based off of your engagement. If you know you're not coming to the community every day, daily doesn't make sense. It just starts filling in your inbox. Weekly is probably a better version. But choosing whatever your cadence is probably the best. If you only come to the community once a month, the monthly is probably better. But it will start curating. And the downside of the month is a lot of things can happen over a month. And so if you're only getting that version, you're probably only getting the 4 or 5 things that happen in the month. And it's rarely where only 4 or 5 things happen in a month. Oh yeah, I should remember my own transitions. So one of the first things I also recommend, hey, I know at the start page, I've made my groups cleaned, I've cleaned my subscription center, I'm almost time and get ready to get engaged in the community. So one of the lesser known facts is we do use an auto moderation feature. We do this because our community is so huge, and the bigger a community, the more spammers love us. And so I have instituted a lot of different automated rules based off of different criteria. And one of them actually goes based off of your pepper level. And your pepper level starts as pimento and you work your way up. And anyone who's level 1, which is pimento, you automatically get moderated. I don't know who you are. I don't know if you're an IT pro. You might be a spammer. So when you do certain things, you put a hyperlink in there, you put an image, someone on my team actually goes and looks at that content before it ever goes live. The thing spammers have yet to figure out, and I'm hoping no one here is from a spam farm. Okay, just checking. Is once you get past Pimento, get to Sonora, that's at second level, that goes away. Doesn't mean I can't put you in auto moderation, but we figure, hey, if you figured out how to fill out your profile, you're going to get 100 points between this and the next thing I'll show. Edit profile. You get 100 points and you get sort of past that spam guard. And while everyone recognizes what it is, it's still annoying. If I make a post and the first thing I see says, hey, your post has gone into moderation because we want to check you out, it's sort of annoying. So I always recommend filling out your profile, not just for that though, and I'll talk more about this here. We also have job experience and verified professional. If you fill that out, you also get another 100 points. So all of a sudden, you're almost to the 3rd level. The reason I do that isn't because internet points are cool, although, hey, badges and points are fun. For us, it's helpful because we start curating the community based off what we know about you, but it's actually really helpful for your peers. A lot of times I'll have an IT pro come in the community and it's like, hey, I need help, my network's down, and this is what I'm using, and that's all they tell you. But if I'm in Texas or if I'm in London, I have a lot different things I have to start worrying about. Do I need to be HIPAA compliant? Am I GDPR? What are the vendors that I have access to? Is my company really big or really small? So these are the data points we start giving there, which is also sort of why you see a lot of our IT pros use a pseudonym versus their real name. I don't want to give away all the keys of my castle, like, hey, you're Sean at Spiceworks. I sort of have to. But if, I used to use my online moniker as Ashton Temper, I could use that, but give away some of the details of my company without the company URL. And people can start giving me better information. They start seeing what my network size is. They see what industry I'm in. They know my geography. It's really helpful when they're trying to help you help them. And now that you're all set up, you're past 100 points, you're not going to get auto-moderated, I always recommend you go and introduce yourself. And it seems like a funny little thing to do, but the reason I recommend this is that first post is sometimes really hard to do. When I talk to a lot of IT pros, when I've seen they've been a lurker for sometimes years and they finally make that first post, I'll ask them, like, hey, what took so long? And they said, well, I've had questions in the past, but I don't want to feel stupid. You figure, hey, I ran into this issue. I'm sure everyone else knows how to fix it. And so instead, I might just Google it or I'll search around. I won't actually ask my question. Most of them, I noticed, once they have a post under their belt, that sort of starts to go away. It's like, hey, I've posted, I've introduced myself. When you read this thread, you'll notice it's really long. Lots of fun replies in there. But it gets that under your belt. You already sort of know how posting works within our community. Why do I have a blank? Oh, yes. Haha. Pepper loaves. I've already referenced this one before. Starts as pimento and you work your way up. Pure capsaicin, which is funny because you see it just jots out a little bit. You'll notice it is actually more than double the level right before it. That's sort of why I called out Gary D. Williams. Getting to that level is insane. It's basically doing everything you've done in the community and then doing it again and doing a little bit more before you reach that level. But what we do have is whenever you reach certain thresholds, you get an auto link to the official I made the next pepper level. And I hyperlink that because I want to actually go to it. And again, is just one of those, ooh, that is interesting. Oh, because I'm not network connected. So guess what? We'll do that at the end. That would have been helpful. This one you already saw on the main stage. This is a new feature we've rolled out earlier. It was early this year. The first iteration was actually Verified Pro. We rolled that out in November. And the reason I remember that is my team rolled it out when I was halfway to Indiana to pick up my daughter for college, and they rolled it out and everything broke. And they're like, hey, I know you're on the road, but can you help me? And it's one of those, you have to pull over to the side, go to the local IHOP, get online and start fixing things really quickly. But it was one of our building steps to get to this itself. The more information we have about individuals, the more we can start showing out who are different experts in the different areas. And the reason I find this really important is I've been with Spiceworks since 2011. And we've always used the pepper scale. And people go in there and they'll see individuals and they'll go, oh, hey, look, this person's a Anaheim and this person's a pure capsaicin, so he must be smarter because he's a pure capsaicin. But if you actually go look at his profile, maybe all he's posted is lolcats every day and he's just getting points from engaging in that way. You will not reach pure capsaicin by posting lolcats, but. Whereas with this, though, it helps in showing where your actual expertise is. I could be really proficient, for example, in Linux, but then when someone's asking a Windows Server thing, I may not be as proficient. And so this is where it's showing where someone has that proficiency when it's valid. So, for example, you'll see Brad here. This is a general IT security area. He has a lot of general IT experience. But if I went in the networking group, you would not see that byline on him. It has nothing to do with networking unless it happens to be network security. So we only show them when they're applicable. The other thing that we talk to our users about is this isn't an all-time record. We do use windows of opportunity. If you were an IT security expert back in 1995, probably not as relevant today. So we use a window of opportunity of about 2 to 3 years looking at your content, looking at best answers, helpful posts. We use some proprietary algorithm, as they like to use the buzz term internally, and sort of promote who are those individuals with that experience. But they're great to go read, see what they're going on. Those are the people I generally lean towards. If I have a question, I see 2 great posts, not sure what the answer is, I'm going to lean towards the one I know has some of that expertise versus the one who may just be saying something that he may not actually know what he's talking about. Another feature that we put in, this one's a couple years ago, is called the Daily Challenge. And who here is familiar with like Trivia Crack, for example? So a few of you here. Sort of our own version of that. What it does is you'll see it on the start page. You'll also get it in your feed. And for me, I actually get mine in my inbox, just because sometimes I'm looking at my feed for other things or start page for other things. This always reminds me to get it. And the reason it's important is because there's a streak associated. And I don't want to break my streak, of course. And so it's only weekdays, and as long as I take it, it keeps that streak moving. But like I said, it's usually just asking some general IT questions. I'll go in there, it goes from very easy questions to insanely hard ones. There's some of them where I've had to go fact check, and I'm like, wow, it's something I did not know at all. And usually even our IT director has to go do his homework on some of the answers. So you can take that from the 3 different places. It's really helpful because it's one of those nods that keeps reminding you to come back. It's like, hey, I have to take my daily challenge. Okay, I've done that. Let me check my feed. I've done that. Hey, what is the next thing I want to do? And usually at that point, we start trying to promote content to you that we feel like you have some expertise in. If you're a Windows Server admin, we start pointing you, hey, here's some individual Windows Server questions. Can you go in and help them? And then, of course, like with all of our stuff, there's some kind of leaderboard. You can see what your streaks are. I used to do IT pro. I used to be an IT pro before I got in the game industry, so I still know some things. The reason, though, I get a lot of questions on this is like, why don't we use this in the expertise system? For the reason, as you see, that I am in the 86th percentile. Sometimes I Google my answers. I'm like, I think it could be this or this. I go fact check myself at first. So for areas like this, we don't use that on expertise just because they would start promoting people who may or may not be experts. And the other nice thing about that is, as you're taking questions, you can always go back, see what you've taken, what level they are. But the most, what did I get wrong? Oh, yeah. But the thing I like about this the most is it'll also give you a link off to an explanation. And that doesn't just give you an explanation of why the answer was that, but generally you're going to see some conversations going on in there. The reason I enjoy that is I subscribe to most of them, and I'll see where people are like, ooh, that was a really hard question, and this is why, but also people point out why sometimes it's a bad question. And the reason I point that out is we did a couple hundred of questions as Spice workers. We did a lot of research and posted those. We also allow, as you'll actually see here, as an individual, I can also submit a question. And our moderation staff goes through those when they're submitted, but sometimes if your expertise isn't leaning where there's an actual question, you may think one that's submitted was a good question. Sometimes it's not. And so usually when I'm getting feedback from the forums or feedback from there's a flagging mechanism, it helps me go in and research and make sure we're either pruning those questions or just fixing them. Also, sometimes not all of us have the best grammar. We have a couple of very astute grammar people in our community, shall we say, and they like to tell us how to reword things as well. So it helps me keep things clean. So from that, I'm going to get online, but at the same time, I'll ask questions. The reason I like to do that is a lot of the community is changing so often. Sometimes I make a slide, and the next day the slide's different. So we also have a mic, I believe. Yes, she's grabbing the mic. So does anyone have any questions to start off with while I'm figuring out which network I'm supposed to be connected to? Okay, so now I'm going to get all my notifications from all my Spiceheads on stuff.
Am I on? Hello? Hello? Can you hear me?
I can hear you, but not from the mic. Yeah.
Okay. It's up to my mouth, but anyway. I put it in my mouth? No. No, I was just going to ask about proficiencies, is it based off of like your job description, or how do you guys tell who's proficient in what?
Are you talking about the expertise part?
Oh, yeah.
So the expertise is based off of 3 different things. It looks at best answers that you've received from other individuals. It looks at how-tos you've written that have reached a certain threshold. So just writing a how-to doesn't mean you actually wrote one well. But if we see enough people engage with it, enough people read it, enough people flag it as a good how-to, that starts counting towards your criteria. And something else we've updated over the last year is what we call helpful votes. So we have what we call a spice up or a spice down. You'll notice that's like a little pepper on one side. If there's a technical question, so it's not a technical discussion, but a technical question specifically, on the right side, there's a thumb up, thumb down version of that. And so as IT pros go and say, hey, yeah, that was a great answer, we also start counting that. And the reason we differentiate that from best answer is many times a best answer is situational. He may have a problem that isn't necessarily the best solution given, but it's the best solution for his situation. And so he'll award that saying, hey, yeah, Kate, that was a great answer. That actually helped me. But you'll notice a lot of times there are other IT pros in there saying, hey, if you actually could have done it this way, it would have worked better. Maybe you had more budget, maybe you had a different router, things like that. And as other IT pros are going through, they're like, if I was in this situation, this is what I would do. And so we allow the other IT pros to weigh in and say, hey, this is what I feel is helpful. An update we have, I like to use the term coming soon because developers, sometimes they reach their deadlines, sometimes those deadlines get pushed out. But one of the updates we have with helpful votes is actually giving more preference to someone who has expertise. So if there's a security question, if Brad goes and says, hey, I found this post really helpful, we want to start giving more credence to that versus if I go give it. I am not a security expert. I may only give that to you and that gives you 1 point. Brad may do it and all of a sudden that gives 50 points. Now I say points, it's really more of a weighting system. So it looks at the different pieces of content. You get different weights based off of that content piece. But on top of that, there is a window of opportunity. And the closer you get to that end of that window, the less that starts weighing. So someone who's given an answer over the last year is going to have more weight than someone who answered something 5 years ago. And the reason we do that right now is because we don't get very granular. There's not like a Windows Server 2016 expertise, there's a Windows Server expertise. And so Windows Server back in 2012 or 2008 is definitely different than the 2016 version. And so because of that window, we're making sure you're getting more up-to-date expertise. Long term, again, I want to get a little bit more granular with that so it can be better based off of the technology. You could be a Windows 3.1 expert if you really want to, in whether that answer was today or 10 years ago, but we just haven't gotten to that level yet. Did that answer your question? Awesome. Anyone else have any questions? You guys already know everything about the community. This is great. So how many of you already made your 10th post today? Who here is a member of a Spice Corps? Who here knows what a Spice Corps is? Who here doesn't know what a Spice Corps is? There we go. Okay, so I'll answer this. So again, we use all these spicy terms, and that's something we're trying to get better with. A Spice Corps is actually a local IT meetup. And the reason I like to promote them is we have one in Austin, there's one in Dallas-Fort Worth, there's one in New York. They're just all across the globe. We even have 2 in Alaska, which I don't know how there's 2 of them, but I guess Alaska is a pretty big state. And what it is these are actually run by other IT pros. So it's a local IT meetup, and sometimes it's easier to share those headaches with someone who's in your region. Not just helps you make friends, and who doesn't need a friend, but also helps me based off of the things you know. If I go into there, I'm in healthcare, you're in healthcare, we're both in the same region, maybe even the same size of company, we sort of have the same headaches and we can help learn from each other. There's also times where I need someone hands-on to help me diagnose something. It's great to do over a remote desktop or over just to the phone, but many times if I get you to come in and test something locally, that helps me out a lot more. So it's a way of making connections with your peers locally. They're run by Spiceheads themselves, so IT pros. Again, we call them Spiceheads, but they're IT pros. And they help facilitate them depending on the group itself. Sometimes they run once a month, sometimes they run once a quarter. I actually just took over the program, I want to say it was like February. So it used to be a marketing program. I work in product engineering. So what we're trying to do with it now is do a much better job of not just bringing bigger awareness to it, but doing it a lot more programmatically. When you join the community, sometimes they'll say, hey, go join this, but we've also asked you to do 5 to 6 other things right then. You're like, okay, I really just need to make my first post because I have a break fix issue and I need an answer now. And so we want to make it more so where we have the awareness of where you are, but not in a creepy way. But say, hey, Josh runs our local Spice Corps here. We have a lot of people already in that Spice Corps discussion group, but there are a lot of people in Austin who don't even know that group exists. So we want a way of saying, not letting Josh know that I live in Austin, even though he does, but the community itself saying, hey, there's a local IT meetup happening in your area. If you didn't know about it, here's some more details. If you'd like to participate, fine. So that's some of the things we're starting to do with all these different data points we're getting from users. The reason we're going to base that more off of one of the things we ask for is your location. I generally know that based off of your IP, but I know a lot of people use proxies. I have to VPN. Sometimes you think I'm in Canada. Some of the emails I get from my own work are in German because I had to VPN into our German office one time, and I've been trying to get them to fix that. So we're trying to base it off of the data you give us, or actually at least ask you to sanitize it, saying, hey, we think you're in Germany. And I can say, no, actually, guess what? I'm 2 cubicles down from you. You should come say hi. Yes? Only if you've joined it. Correct. So everything we use in the community is facilitated through the group system. Group system is just a fancy term for a forum. And so within there, we have a forum for major technology areas, but also for local meetup groups. We actually also have regional groups. So for example, there's a Spice Corps of Austin, which is about that local meetup group, but there's also a Texas regional group. And it's just for IT pros who are in Texas that want to talk about Texas things. Riding horses, wearing cowboy boots, whatever we do here. So yes, if you've joined it, it will show up in that same area. We do sort of segment it saying, hey, here are the technical areas you're in, here are the private areas, here are they'll say Spice Corps on that one. Because we do have some Spiceheads who join multiples. For me, I'm part of Austin and San Antonio, just because San Antonio is close enough for me to go down to. Did you have a question? Yeah, you were all. Oh, you're just saying hi.
How much influence do you guys have in the Spice Corps?
When you say influence, what do you mean?
Control, like can anybody just go set one up, or do we need to kind of work?
Oh, no. So okay. I think I got online. Let me throw this over here. So yes, so I actually run the program, so I have at least a little influence these days. Let me see if this will pop over. Need to bring it to another screen. Oh no, it's mirroring. So actually, when you're in the community, mine is under more just because I have extra fun stuff because of what I do. So in here, there's obviously, disregard that. There's parts of just about joining a Spice Corps, but there's also one about becoming a Spice leader, which is someone who runs a Spice Corps. And so in there is a form that they fill out, and there are different things that we look at before we will accept someone. We sort of give them what's the lowdown, what's expected of them. We do let them know right up front that this isn't something where Sean pays the budget and I do all the organization and you just get to show up and be the Spice leader. Being a Spice leader actually is a lot of work. You go out there, you make sure you're sending out invitations, you're finding a location. Many times they're trying to find a vendor to help facilitate that, whether that's bringing beer and pizza, having an office space, things like that. So we go through that, we explain, explain the system to them a little bit more. I don't know why it's doing that. So yes, we do have influence over that. And then even when they've started, the fun area becomes, we actually had a situation that came up pretty recently though. At the end of the day, we help facilitate a Spice Corps, but the members themselves are sort of who run it. And the reason I bring it up is we had a situation, we actually had an individual who was part of a Spice Corps, and without getting all into his business, we'll just say he did some really stupid things. And as a membership, they decided they didn't want him to participate anymore. They talked to the Spice leader, they informed him why. He came to us and explained like, hey, I want to be a member of this Spice Corps, this is why I feel I should be. I talked to him, I talked to the membership, sort of understood the situation. And we were able to come to an amicable separation, shall we say. So at the end of the day, though, while I have a lot of influence, there are certain things that I'm always going to lean towards the group as a whole. If it was just a Spice leader saying, oh, I hate Kate, and Kate can never show up anymore, like, well, that's not a good reason. But if something bad had happened and there was a reason like other members were uncomfortable with someone being there, yeah, we would step in. And if it was something that was so bad, there may be points where we're like, we excuse someone from the community. It's a rare occurrence, but every once in a while, at the end of the day, we're always looking to make this sure it's a very healthy community. And sometimes we have people who are unhealthy elements. Does that answer? There are things we want to do in the future with it, though. So like I said, this just came under me. I used to run IT meetups, or not IT. I used to run local meetups in my last life, so to speak. So there are places I want to take this program, if, especially now with the acquisition with Ziff Davis, that does actually give me access to more resources. And because of that, I'm hoping we can build the program to do a lot more. What that is, we'll see. But I think there's a lot of headaches we can take from the Spice leaders and actually help either through programmatically or just making those connections with them. The biggest headache, we actually have the Spice Leader Summit this last Sunday, and we had about 50 participants come, all who run different Spice Core groups, and we talk about the headaches. What can we do for you over the next year to help facilitate that? The number one thing that came up was vendor presence. As users, they want to know a vendor's there because they know beer and pizza are there, basically why. But as a vendor, they want to know there's enough bodies there. Like, hey, if there's you and your two friends, I'm not sponsoring your Spice Core. So it gets a little bit of a chicken and egg. And then, it's like, how do you know as an IT pro, who do I reach out to? What vendors do I reach out to? Who are the individuals of that organization I should be reaching out to? So we're going to try and do a better job of that. Marta spoke a little bit about on the main stage today with connections, but we want to take that to a different level where it's very much, hey, here's vendors in your area or vendors that we know are very regional. CCB is a great vendor, for example. They helped us with the Midwest meetup, but they're all about going across the globe and talking to people. Scale's another one like that, Unitrend. So we know a lot of vendors that I know just because I engage in the community and work on those programs. But as a Spice leader, many times you're like, yeah, I don't know any of these vendors or who are those points of contact. So that's the first pain point I really want to help outside of just bringing more awareness to the program. Sweet. Anyone else have any questions? Or the flip side, any concerns? Is there reasons that you've been in the community but you haven't participated? Are there things that you're worried about? Things that you wish were different? Anything? It's a safe room. Because I don't think we're live streaming. Oh, maybe we are. You never know. Awesome. All right. Well, I think that's about it then. It'll save you about 15, 20 minutes to get some more coffee and maybe something to eat. And if you have any questions, you can always go in the community. I'm very easy to find. I'm just Sean at Spiceworks. You'll usually see me posting stuff on the homepage, or the quickest way is just do something really stupid. Someone will point your content out to me really quickly. Awesome. Well, if you have any questions, feel free to come on up. I'll turn the mic off so I don't tell the whole room about it. Thank you.